Uh, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Uh, we are from Group A. Today we're gonna present this about demand and revenue management by Jian. First, I will introduce my team. Uh, myself. First one, myself is Dimas Imanullah, NPM 19062, and then Ivan Alamsyah 19066, and then Chandra Erickson Marbun 19075, and then Muhammad Aizar 19174, and last but not least Barul Ulum 19064. In this first section, we're gonna talk about setting optimal rents for apartment firms. First, introduction. Uh, Everyday apartment operators have to set a rental rate for apartment units. How the rents are determined will have a significant impact on an apartment firm's value, revenue, and profit. In this chapter, we introduce an approach to setting the optimal rent based on the theory of revenue management. The chapter is organized as follows. Or to understand how rents are set in the apartment industry, one needs to be familiar with some relevant concepts. In this section, we first introduce the concept of unit type, base rent, concession, base effective rent, new lease, and renewal lease. Then we describe the fair housing law which prevails in the setting of rents in the USA. First, I will explain about concept unit and unit type. Concept unit and unit type is an apartment completely approximates to a hotel, but it distinguishes itself in many aspects. An apartment community consists of one or more buildings, each of which has dozens to hundreds of units, depending on the size of the apartment community. A unit is the fundamental product that the apartment can provide to its prospective tenants. The units in an apartment can be classified into different types according to their common attribute. For example, the units can be classified by the attribute of the number of bedrooms. And then about concept-based rent, concession, and base effective rent. An apartment unit is often rented on a monthly basis. The monthly rent for each unit is an apartment often offers concession as discount incentive to attract prospective tenants or retain existing residents individually based on the base rent. Amenities and concession. When a concession is in place, the monthly rent that a tenant actually pays might be much less than what was advertised. As a consequence, the base rent from which the monthly rent was derived becomes lower. Therefore, the term of base effective rent is used to define the net value of base rent, which is the base rent adjusted by the concession in this chapter. The optimal rent will be set for the base effective rent only. The terms of rent or rental rate will be used to represent the base effective rent interchangeably after. Sampai piro lali aku. Okay, for the next test will be gonna explained by my friend Aizar. You can go on.
Yes, thank you. US and renewal is before a prospective tenant move into an apartment, he is required to sign a new lease. A new lease is in essence a contract between the tenant and the apartment company around 45 to 60 days before a lease expiry. A tenant is required to notify the apartment about his decision. He can choose to move out, split it, or to stay for additional months. It is worth pointing out the its least new or renewal is of a large portion of revenue in our apartment total revenue inventory. This is because a lease often lasts for a month. During during which it continue contributing to the revenue inventory from fair housing law. In the apartment industry, the setting of rents has to comply with relevant law. The Fair Housing Act is one issues live in the user. This law was passed in one, 1068 items to protect the dwelling seeker from landlord discrimination. In the hotel industry, such regulation to do not exist. Same hotel product can be priced differently. Customers are often segmented explicit by being offered different room rates for the same room in the apartment industry. However, this kind of customer segmentation becomes prohibitive because of this fair housing act. Next, methodology. Uh, we focus our discussion on setting the optimal rent for new leases. Determinants of optimal rents take into account the factor of competitive influence, market condition, and capacity limitation. In this section, three determining variable are fixed in the template, followed by an analysis of the relationship between the variable and the optimal range. An illustration is then given on how optimal range can be optimized. Next, variable identifier. Many variables can be used to determine the optimal range. Some of the variables may be known, but most of them are unknown. To apply the principle of revenue management, we identify three sub variable as reference rent, demand and supply. The variable of demand reflect the market condition. This variable represents the possible number of days that an apartment may expect. Tokens of demand are normally defined. Constrained demand is defined as the number of leases that can be realized and the reference rent under the assumption that the apartment had infinity capacity. Constrained demand, on the other hand, is defined as the number of leases that can be realized and the optimal rate in the considerate of capacity limitation. Next, relationship between variable. The variable of reference ranks, demand and supply do not work alone. They interact with order to determine the optimal range. We briefly discuss the relationship among the variable and the optimal range. Next, my friend.
Okay, I will continue the presentation. For the next, demand and plan. It is widely believed that a strong relation exists between demand and rent. The assumption of a monopoly market is often used to describe such a relationship. In a monopoly market, demand is expected to decrease as rent increase. How demand change over rent depends on the rent elasticity of demand. The rent elasticity of demand is defined as the ratio of the percentage change in demand to the percentage change in rent. The note beta is constant for all rents. The rent elasticity of demand is defined as the ratio of the percentage change in demand to the percentage change in rent. The note beta is constant for all rents. For the example, the statistic is in picture. And next, demand and supply. Demand is essential to vary over rent, but its realization will be subject to many factors. As previously assumed, the relationship of unconstrained demand was not limited by the apartment capacity. In reality, however, such an assumption is unrealistic. The relationship of demand is always limited by capacity. In other words, the apartment capacity limits the total number of units that can be occupied by the demand. In particular, the total number of units to be occupied by the constrained demand and the optimal rent must be less than or equal to the supply. For the next, reference rent and optimal rent. Reference rent is defined as the representation of average rent in the market. Therefore, the optimal rent shall be determined within a small range of the reference rent. If this is not the case, the optimal rent that is always determined will become unrealistic in reflecting the market condition. The range of reference rent can be expected as a rent interval. The lower bound and upper bound of the rent interval represent the minimum rent and maximum rent, between which the optional rent can be set accordingly by the relationship between demand and rent. A demand internal can be mapped from the rent interval. The demand interval defines a range within which the constrained demand will vary. Lower bound and upper bound of this demand interval will correspond to the upper bound and lower bound of the interval respectively. And continue that how optimal rent is set. The relationship between the variable and the optional rent can be illustrated as in figure 15.2. In figure 15.2, the axis the market rent and the axis demand. The solid line depicts a segment of the function of GP min beta, where the represent demand and P rent. The horizontal line represents the supply on the x-axis of rent. The labels of rent, min and max denote the reference rent. The lower bound and upper bound of the rent interval respectively on the y-axis of demand. The labels of wang, min and max denote the unconstrained demand, the upper bound and lower bound of the demand interval correspondingly. And the picture statistic in demand and rent. Okay, for the next, we'll be continue with our friend. Thank you.
The next is procedure. The preceding analysis gives us a better understanding of how the optimal rent can be determined using the variable of reference rent, demand, and supply. Since the values of these variables are not known, they need to be estimated. In this section, we describe a procedure to estimate the reference rent, forecast the demand, and predict the supply. We then solve the optimal rent by formulating an optimization problem. First, estimate reference rent. As pointed out previously, the reference rent variable is an abstract notion. Its value can never be observed in reality. Several methods have been proposed to estimate the reference rent. Rent surveying is one of such methods. These methods estimate the reference rent based on the survey result from the participant of apartment, operator, and expert. The use of this method is costly and time-consuming. Also, the resulting estimate to circumvent this dilemma, we opportunity to adopt a heuristic method. This method is built based on business rules, made of the reference trend tends to be best. This is because the survey participant may have very different perspective and experience. This method starts with the identification of business indicators, which are believed to account for the determination of reference rent. A set of business rules is then specified according to the possible outcomes of the indicator. The indicator of market composite gives a representation about what competitors are pricing. The next, forecast demand. The variable of demand is defined as the constant trend demand at the reference rent. Similar to the variable of reference rent, this variable is also a theoretical notion. This again makes forecasting as justifying the demand difficult. The accuracy of the resulting demand forecast has a direct impact on the setting of optimal rent, thus affecting the realization of revenue gain. A number of methods are available to forecast the unconstrained demand. Each method has its own strength and weakness. For instance, the exponential smoothing method is often used in the practice because of its simplicity. We will not discuss how to forecast the unconcentrated demand in detail here. Instead, we focus our attention on correcting the number of leases observed, based on which forecasting models will be built. To forecast the unconcentrated demand, the observed number of leases needs to be corrected or unconcentrated by relaxing the two restrictions. The correction can be done into sequential steps. The first step is to unconcentrate the number of leases by removing the opacity restriction. The second step is to estimate the number of leases by relaxing the rent restriction based on the correct number of leases from the first step. The next is forecast supply. Supply forecast represents the number of units to be available for rent. It can be expressed as follows. Supply forecast sama dengan vacant units plus early termination, where the term of vacant units represent the number of units currently vacant, and the term of early termination is possible number of units to be available due to early move-outs. In this forecasting of the supply forecast, we only take into account the possible number of units due to the early move-outs. One may wonder why we do not consider the possibility of late move-outs. The reason is that the scenario of possible late move-outs rarely happen in practice. As pointed out previously, before a tenant's lease expires, he is required to notify the apartment office about his decision, typically 45 to 60 days in advance. This tenant has two choices: move out of the apartment as leased or renew his lease for another term. In either case, the likelihood of late move-outs is eliminated.
Okay, I will continue the presentation. Now I will explain about optimus rent. Now that we have estimated the reference rent and the forecasted demand and the supply, we can now find the optimal rents. The optimal rents can be solved by formulating an optimization problem. An optimization problem consists of two parts, objective and constraint. The objective part specifies the total revenue from constrained demand, which need to be maximized. The constraint part, on the other hand, specifies a set of conditions that the constrained demand need to satisfy. And now we go to case study. In this section, we illustrate how the above procedure is applied to apartment in Atlanta, USA. This apartment has 183 units, one of one bedroom unit type. The optimal rents are set on 26 November 2008 for a planning horizon of 13 weeks. Figure 15.3 display the demand forecast and the supply forecast. In this graph, the dots represent the unconstrained demand forecast at the reference rent. The solid line denotes the number of units to be occupied from this unconstrained demand forecast, whereas the dashed line indicates the supply forecast. It can be seen that the supply forecast is much higher than the unit to be occupied by the unconstrained demand. One reason is that this planning horizon of 13 weeks happens to cover a season of low demand. This horizon includes the holidays of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year. Very few people are interested in moving in Atlanta during this time of year. So we can see in this graph the solid one is the demand forecast and the garis putus-putus is a supply forecast. Because of the expensive supply during this horizon, a natural response might be to decrease the rent in an attempt to stimulate some additional demand to fill in the vacant unit. The questions becomes now, how much to decrease the rent? In this picture, the optimal rents and the reference rents are displayed for the lease term of 8 and 12 months, respectively. This planning horizon can be viewed as two periods, each of which demonstrates a different behavior of the optimal rent. During the period of the first 5 weeks, the optimal rents for both lease terms have been set $40 lower than the reference rents. During the period of the last 8 weeks, the optimal rent have been set as increasing. In particular, the optimal rents for the lease term of 8 months are set above the reference rent during the last 3 weeks. The reason is that the demand from the first period might have been filling the vacant unit, and thus less demands need to be encouraged. As we can see, the graphic is up when uh, when in at the fifth week in 22 December. Also, it go up when 19 January 2009. The cost. In this picture, display the unit to be occupied by the unconstrained demand forecast versus those by the constrained demand forecast. In this graph, the triangular symbols represent the optimal demand forecast, whereas the solid line denotes the number of units to be filled in by this optimal demand forecast. In addition, the dashed line represent the number of units to be occupied by unconstrained demand forecast. It can be seen that for the first 10 weeks, the number of units to be occupied by the optimal demand forecast are more than those by the unconstrained demand forecast. This is because the optimal rents are set below reference rent to encourage the demand. For the last 3 weeks, the number of units to be occupied by optimal demand forecasts become less than those by the unconstrained demand forecast. This is because some optimal range, say for least term of 8 months, are set above the reference range to discourage the demand. Conclusion: we have described an approach to setting the optimal range for apartment firms based on the theory of revenue management. This approach has been favored to be a better alternative to the traditional method in practice. In the case study above, the optimal rents are set by lease rent option or LRO. The LRO is the first revenue management system in apartment industry, provided by the Rainmaker Group in Atlanta in the USA. The system implements a variant of the procedure as described, but it is more sophisticated. The system has been used by a handful of leading apartment companies in USA for several years. The outcome appears promising. It is reported that an average of 3% of revenue has been increased over the traditional approaches.